I'm going to talk a little bit about free speech today, a concept which gets a lot of people, especially young people, to roll their eyes. And they will say, oh, you just want to say gamer words, that's why you want free speech. To which the rebuttal should be, oh, you just want to put fake boobs on women, that's why you want free healthcare. But here is something that most people don't talk about when the concept of free speech comes out, and that is that censorship only affects the poor, if you think about it. Because if you're a wealthy person, if you're like J.K. Rowling, you can literally say whatever you want, and they can't do anything against you. You're already rich. They can't get you fired. If what you said is legal, they're not going to get you arrested. So rich people can say whatever they want. Politicians in power can do whatever they want as well. Justin Trudeau blackfacing is another great example on how there are no repercussions for the people in power. And then you have certain positions like a university professor with tenure. They can also say whatever they want. So certain people are above these rules. Like they literally don't care what the culture is like and what the rules in society are, what is offensive and what isn't. Because their privilege, their wealth allows them to be offensive. Meanwhile, if you're a plumber, if you're some random guy who says a gamer word or says something that's considered offensive, you can get fired, you can get ostracized, people distance themselves to you. Why? Because you're poor. So you need to stop being poor and you need to start being more wealthy so you can afford to have free speech. And when I say free speech, I don't necessarily mean it as in the legal term. No, I mean it as a concept. You see, in my country, especially 10 years ago, the very notion of censorship and advocating for censorship would be the exact same way people would treat a racist in the United States right now. Like people would just distance themselves from you, they would isolate you, they would not want to engage with you because you're advocating for censorship. And with that mindset, you have people creating rules and laws which codify free speech. With a mindset where people advocate for censorship, then eventually you're going to get rules and laws that promote, I guess, safety rather than free speech. Laws such as you're not allowed to burn the European Union flag. In the UK, you have very bizarre legislation where it leads to even if a dog takes a poop on someone else's porch, that can be a hate crime, because a hate crime requires any person to feel grossly offended by something, and it can be literally anything. And it doesn't say whether that thing which is offensive needs to be a human or a dog. So yes, the dog can be guilty of a hate crime in the UK because their rules are so bizarre. And at the end of the day, I guess this is the exact poll which shows the type of people that have different mindsets and are pushing society in different directions. On one hand, you have the people who think free speech needs to be protected, and on the other hand, you have that people need to be protected from offensive or hateful speech, which is something very ambiguous. It can be literally anything, and it creates a culture of dread. There is a reason why if you travel to Germany, you will see that the Western Germans are more open to have conversation. They're more loud about their feelings and they talk a lot more than the Eastern Germans who, once you get to know them, they're very nice people, but in other regards, they're very similar to the people of Eastern Europe. They're a lot more stoic, they're a lot more cold, they're a lot more reserved. Why? Because they already lived in a regime that cared a lot about what people speak, so it was better to just keep quiet than to say things, because anything you said could lead you to get fired, could have your communist membership card revoked. So people were just really quiet. They didn't talk about politics almost at all. They didn't talk about their opinions because people didn't trust their neighbor. Like their neighbor could be an informant, so just don't engage. People would just segregate, which is what the regime actually wanted people to do. They wanted to atomize people so that they just go to work, come home, go to work, come home, and don't form relationships, don't really bond together, because people who bond together are problematic. They can go out and protest, or they can comment when the regime is abusing them. But, you know, like these are the people who, I guess, if you look at now, like the AFD and most of the problematic individuals in Germany come from East Germany because they've been through the authoritarianism, and they don't like the direction of things when we move towards a culture of safety rather than a culture of freedom. Now, this poll was done in the United Kingdom, and it asked various age groups whether or not free speech is important. And the group with the blue thinks that free speech is important. The group with the red think that safety is more important, preventing individuals from being offended. Which, by the way, you can offend someone without using any slurs or hate speech. The famous Brandon Ixo, coming from the United States, is a perfect example with that. You can offend people without actually using hateful slurs or hateful language. Sometimes it can be even more offensive than if you were to just use a slur. No, like what this does is to normalize censorship, to think that censorship is not only good, but censorship prevents violence, censorship keeps a society peaceful, which is literally not the case. The only thing that censorship does is it pushes things under the rug and makes people feel atomized and alone. But in reality, no, protesting is what prevents violence. It's one of the reasons why protesting is allowed in Europe, because you have to think Europe has a history of the monarchy, of the king who allowed things to happen. And many nations found out that, okay, if the peasants actually go out and air their grievances in public, you can actually talk and negotiate with them and prevent violence. But if the peasants are immediately suppressed and they're not allowed to speak and they're marginalized and no one listens to them, well, then they have only one recourse left, right? So that is why we have free speech, at least here in Europe. That is the reason why this practice even came up, is to avoid violence. It does less violence, not more. But, whatever. Let's look at the demographic groups. It seems that conservatives, 51 of them think that it should be important to protect free speech. So the thing that shocks me here is that 49% of conservatives don't think that free speech is important. Basically speaking your mind. So basically you can have whatever thoughts you want, just don't speak them out. Like, a society of mutes is a safer society, according to 35% of conservative voters. I guess the reason you don't get to 100, now that I look of it, is that maybe some people abstained. So they just didn't want to engage with this. Then when you look at men, 47% of the men actually want free speech, while 36% of the men want safety. As for the women, only 30% of women want free speech, 51% of the women want safety. But the thing that is the most interesting out of all of this is that when you look at the general population, you will see that more people in the UK agree that liberty is not as important as safety. So this is what I've been trying to tell to people like Sargon of Akkad and other YouTubers, is like, look, just because you want freedom and liberty and you think you can just rationalize this to a person, that's not the case, because in most of these countries, people want the lock and chain, right? How do you keep a cat safe? Perfect example. How do you keep a cat safe? If you let the cat outside, people will say, well, yeah, but it can run into oncoming traffic, it can be bitten by a dog, it can get sick. All of these are true, right? So how do you keep a cat safe? Well, you take it inside, you feed it, you give it healthcare, you trim its claws, you castrate it so that it doesn't pee on the carpet. You take away its liberty, but the cat is now safe. And this is not necessarily a wrong way to think. It's just that it's a different principle. It's a different way of thinking, which some people may have. And they may think that life is better to have that way, where you are under lock and key and you're not allowed to go outside. You're in a zoo. You get free healthcare, free food, free everything, like a prison. But you don't get to have freedom. Other people want to be the prison guard. Other people want to be the zookeeper. You get all the freedom, but you don't get the benefits of being kept safe. And I guess it's more people like myself. We want to be the prison guard. We want to be the zookeeper because we get freedom. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.